The human is like water. He seeks the path that is not closed to him.
Wow. That is a haunting way to start a conversation, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It stuck with me the moment I read it in the source material. It suggests that migration isn't just a decision, not something you make at the kitchen table over coffee. It's almost like a law of physics. When the pressure gets too high, the water has to move.
It has to find a way out.
And today, we are looking at a massive, massive movement of that water. We're doing a deep dive into a 300-year history of German immigration, all based on the incredible research of Klaus Kampe.
Right. And what I really love about the sources you've pulled together for this, especially Kampe's work, is that he completely ignores the generals and the kings.
Completely.
He goes straight for the diaries,
Yep.
the church records, the frantic letters that people sent back home. It's the history of the people who actually packed the chests and left.
Exactly. So if you're listening, we are not doing a dry timeline of treaties today. We're trying to look at the internal experience of leaving everything you know.
Yeah.
We're going from the just absolute horror of the 30 Years' War right into the political backrooms of colonial America.
Yeah.
And I have to say, going through these sources, there were some genuine shocks for me.
Oh, absolutely. The source material just completely upends that standard immigrant success story narrative.
I mean, we're going to talk about Benjamin Franklin, the man on the $100 bill, the quintessential American being, genuinely
Terrified.
terrified of German immigrants.
It's a very, very different side of Franklin than the one we learned about in school.
He sounds panicked in these letters.
Yeah.
Genuinely panicked.
And then there's the business of hope, where the American dream was essentially sold like snake oil to desperate peasants. Plus, we need to talk about the women.
The invisible half.
The wives on the manifests who are actually the ones holding the new world together. So if you've ever wondered what it actually feels like to pack your life into a box and cross an ocean because you simply cannot stay where you are, well, this is the deep dive for you.
Let's get into it. To understand why millions of people eventually left, we have to understand the spark. We have to go back to the source of the trauma. So we're dropping into the year 1624.
The Holy Roman Empire.
Which, as the old joke goes, was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire.
Exactly. It's not a country like we think of Germany today. It's a patchwork quilt. Hundreds of little principalities, all squabbling.
And in 1624, the 30 Years' War is it's raging.
And for anyone who's a bit rusty on their 17th century history, this isn't just a war of armies meeting in a field. This is total societal breakdown.
It's chaos. It's religious. It's political. And for the civilians, it is just pure terror.
Right. And that's the context where Kampe finds this incredible artifact. It was discovered way later, in 1887, in a library in Basel, Switzerland. Just a yellowed book bound in calfskin.
And it wasn't written by a scholar. It was written by a miller, a guy named Augustin Günter. And this one really got to me.
It's the raw detail, isn't it?
It is. Günter is from a village that gets caught in the crossfire. He describes the soldiers coming in, the village being burned. He mentions his father was killed. But then there's this one line about his mother. He writes that she walked into the forest and never came back.
It's just so heartbreakingly sparse. He doesn't dramatize it. He records the absence. It's like a void on the page.
But what struck me most in Kampe's analysis of this diary is the sensory detail of the trauma. Günter writes about his sleep. He says he hears the mill grinding in his dreams, the sound of his former life, his job, his identity. But then he wakes up to silence.
That silence is heavy. He eventually flees to Basel just to survive. The interesting thing is the why. Why does a miller in 1624 take the time to write a memoir? I mean, paper isn't cheap. He's a refugee. He has nothing.
He actually answers that, doesn't he? It's not for fame.
No, not at all. He explicitly writes, "I write so that when I die, someone reads what we suffered, because he who forgets lets it happen again."
He who forgets lets it happen again. That is. Wow. That's a heavy burden to place on a diary. It feels almost modern, that sentiment.
It really does. And it establishes the foundational motivation for this whole history of German immigration. We often think of, the pioneer spirit, the desire for adventure or gold. But for Günter and millions after him, it started with a desire for what he called Unversehrtheit.
Unversehrtheit. I spent some time with that word in the notes. It's tricky to translate perfectly. It's not just safety.
Yeah, safety is too physical. Unversehrtheit implies unharmedness, integrity, wholeness. Yeah. It's the desire to survive, not just with your body, but with your dignity intact.
To be whole again.
Exactly.
So that's the spark, that deep, desperate need for wholeness. Now, let's fast forward a bit. We move from the individual refugee like Günter to a massive wave. We're jumping to 1709, the story of the Palatines.
And this is where migration turns into a mass exodus. You have to imagine a kind of perfect storm brewing.
The sources lay this out really clearly. First, you've got the War of the Spanish Succession, so the political instability is still there. But then nature decides to pile on.
Oh, yeah. The winter of 1708, 1709, it was historically brutal. We're talking about a deep freeze that basically shattered Europe.
The details are wild. The sources say wine froze inside the barrels. Think about the chemistry of that for a second.
Exactly. I mean, birds were apparently falling dead out of the sky mid-flight.
Crops were destroyed in the ground. People were starving. It was an apocalyptic winter.
And right in the middle of this desperation, when people are freezing and hungry, something viral starts circulating.
Ugh.
The Golden Books.
Yes, these fascinated me. It's like the 18th century version of a viral marketing campaign.
Or almost like a travel influencer's filtered Instagram feed. These were pamphlets, often with gold covers or golden titles, circulating through the Rhine Valley.
And the pitch was incredible. They promised a paradise in the British colonies in America, free land, no taxes.
And a benevolent Queen Anne, who would personally take care of everyone. It was a masterclass in marketing to desperate people. You have a war-torn region, a starving population, and suddenly a brochure says, hey, come to America. It's the Garden of Eden.
It's just people bought it.
Hook, line, and sinker. They did. The Rhine River became what they called the Street of Hope. Thousands of families just started walking.
There's that image from the source that stuck with me. Families floating down the Rhine on rafts, holding their Bibles and the keys to their destroyed houses.
Holding on to the keys. It's such a powerful symbol. It's that hope of return, or maybe just holding on to the idea of home, even when the physical structure is gone. They would sing psalms to soothe the water, as one source puts it.
But here's where the reality check comes in. And it hits hard. They didn't go straight to America. They went to London first.
And London was not expecting them.
Not even close. London was completely overwhelmed. You had over 7,000 Germans arriving in a very short period of time. There was no housing. They ended up living in these massive tent cities in Blackheath, just outside the city.
I can only imagine the reaction of the locals. I mean, you have 7,000 people showing up on your doorstep who don't speak the language.
It was complicated. The sources describe the English reaction as seeing strange people, pale and starved. There was charity. Certainly Queen Anne did help, but there was also fear.
A lot of fear.
The locals were worried these newcomers would take their jobs, undercut their wages.
It's a very modern dynamic, isn't it? The rhetoric hasn't changed much in 300 years. It's the same tension between a humanitarian impulse and economic anxiety.
It really isn't.
Right.
So eventually the British government realizes they can't just keep thousands of Germans in tents in London. They have to move them.
Right. They arrange transport on ships. And the names of the ships are so optimistic. The Friendship, the Patience.
But the crossing was grim. Disease, overcrowding. And when they finally arrive, there's one quote from the source material that really landed for me. It was from a young boy on one of these ships. He wrote, "The wind sings like at home, but the song is strange."
Oh, that just captures the alienation perfectly. They arrive in New York or Pennsylvania, and it is not the paradise the Golden Books promised. There's no free lunch. They have to work. They have to clear forests. They have to survive in a wilderness.
And this influx of Germans didn't go unnoticed. In fact, it really bothered some powerful people. And this is where we get to the twist I mentioned earlier. We need to talk about Benjamin Franklin.
Yes, this is a fascinating chapter. The year is 1754. Franklin is in Pennsylvania. He's looking around, and he is not happy with what he sees.
I think most of us think of Franklin as this open-minded cosmopolitan guy,
Yeah.
the scientist, the diplomat.
The guy inventing bifocals, yeah.
Yeah.
But in 1754, regarding the Germans, he sounded paranoid.
He was deeply anxious. He wrote a letter where he famously called the German immigrants Palatine boors.
Boors. That's not a compliment.
No, it means like uncultured, rough peasants. And his specific complaints were that they weren't learning English. They had their own German language newspapers.
And even the street signs in Philadelphia were starting to be in German.
Right. It sounds like he was afraid of being culturally replaced.
He was. There's that famous quote from him. Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them?
Germanize us. That is a strong fear. He actually thought the English culture was going to be wiped out.
He did. He feared Pennsylvania would become a second Saxony. He genuinely thought they couldn't assimilate, that their values were incompatible with English liberty. He looked at their closed communities and saw a threat to the cohesion of the whole colony.
Which is incredibly ironic when you think about what happened just a few decades later.
The irony is so rich. When the Revolutionary War comes around, Franklin realizes he needs the support of those very same Palatine Boers to fight the British.
So what does he do?
He starts printing pamphlets in German to get them on his side.
Politics never changes, does it? Expediency wins.
It rarely does. When he needed soldiers, they suddenly weren't aliens anymore. They were patriots.
So on one side, we have this fear of the immigrants, but we also have people actively taking advantage of them. We need to talk about the market of hope, because getting to America became a business, and frankly, a pretty dirty one.
It was often a predatory business. The Golden Books were just the start. You had these figures like Johannes Tschudi. He was essentially a high-end con artist targeting migrants.
A real estate scammer, but in the 1700s.
He sold what the sources call land in the air. He would travel through Europe selling plots of land to desperate families. He'd show them maps, beautiful deeds with official-looking wax seals.
Wow.
But when the families arrived in America, the land didn't exist.
Or it was on the side of a cliff or something.
Or in a swamp.
Uh-huh.
Or it was already owned by someone else.
That is devastating. Imagine crossing the ocean, surviving the trip, and finding out your deed is completely worthless. But even if you didn't get scammed by a fake deed, you might still fall into the redemptioner system. This was something I didn't know much about. The mechanics of it are just brutal.
It was systemic. Most of these German families couldn't afford the passage across the Atlantic. It was expensive. So captains would take them for free on the condition that upon arrival, the captain could sell their labor to pay for the ticket.
So they were essentially cargo.
They were known as redemptioners. When the ship docked in Philadelphia, these soul drivers would come on board and inspect the families. They would auction them off.
Order them like cattle.
Yes. You would sign a contract binding you to work for 4 to 7 years to pay off your debt. And the real tragedy is that families were sometimes separated. If a farmer needed a strong boy, he'd buy the son's contract. If someone needed a maid, they'd take the daughter.
There's a quote in the source. They came as free people and woke up as servants.
That sums it up perfectly. And even when they got land, language was this huge barrier. You read about the Schoharie petition.
Yeah, this was just heartbreaking. This is where settlers realized they couldn't even read the contracts they had signed, right?
Exactly. They had been given land, they cleared it, which is backbreaking work. They built homes, and then they realized through the fine print that they didn't actually own it. The contracts were in English. They had been swindled by the legalese.
It just led to this massive sense of disillusionment. They realized that freedom in America had a price tag, and if you couldn't read the language, you were going to pay double.
But, and we have to be balanced here, it wasn't all scams and servitude. There were these moments of incredible moral clarity. We have to talk about Germantown.
Right, the flip side of the coin, the utopian vision.
Exactly. While some were selling fake land, others were trying to build a society based on conscience. This guy, Franz Daniel Pastorius, he founded Germantown in 1683. He led a group of Mennonites and Quakers who were looking for a place to practice their faith without persecution.
And in 1688, just 5 years after founding the town, they did something momentous, something that puts them way, way ahead of their time.
They drafted the first written protest against slavery in the American colonies.
1688. That is incredibly early. That's almost 200 years before the Civil War.
It is. And their argument was so simple and just devastatingly logical. It wasn't abstract. They asked, is it right that people who fled for freedom hold others in bondage?
That's the key insight, isn't it? They connected their own experience as refugees to the plight of the enslaved.
They saw the hypocrisy immediately. They looked at their own history of persecution in Europe, of being hunted, of being oppressed, and said, we cannot do this to others. It wasn't about economics for them. It was about the soul.
So what happened to the protest? Did it change anything?
Sadly, at the time, no. It was pretty much ignored by the larger Quaker assembly. It was considered too radical, too disruptive to the economy. But, and this is crucial, it planted a seed. It shows that the immigrant experience brought a specific type of conscience to the New World. They brought a sensitivity to oppression because they had lived it.
That brings us to another group that often gets ignored in these histories. We've talked about the men writing protests and the men running scams, but what about the women?
Kampe calls them the invisible half. In the ship manifest, they're often just listed as wife or daughter, no names. But when you look at the diaries, and Cam found some incredible ones, you see they were the roots of this new life.
I was really struck by the story of Margrethe Kiefer.
Yes, in Missouri. She was learning to write her name late in life, and she has this amazing quote. She says, "The men laugh when we want to read, but I say, who can read can live."
Who can read can live. That really strikes a chord. It wasn't just about literacy, it was about existence, about asserting your place in the world.
Absolutely. And women were the guardians of culture. While the men were out clearing the land and often interacting with the English-speaking world for business, the women were running the home. They were the ones ensuring the language survived.
There's that detail about the bread.
Right. They taught the children that the object on the table was bread in English, but it was also brought in German. They maintained that bilingual identity. There is this saying in the source, education is the bread that never molds.
I love that. Bread that never molds. It's nourishment that lasts forever.
And women ensured that the next generation knew who they were. They built the bridge between the old world and the new every single day inside the kitchen and the schoolhouse. That effort is what allowed the German identity to survive in America for so long, even as the public sphere became more and more English.
So let's zoom out. What does this all mean for us today? We've looked at 300 years of history, from a miller in a burning village to a settler in Pennsylvania.
I think when you look at the whole arc, from Augustin Günter seeking Unversehrtheit to the families in Germantown fighting for dignity, you realize that migration isn't an anomaly. It's not some error in history. It is the pulse of history.
That's a constant.
It is. And the source material ends with a thought that really brings it full circle. It reminds us that the people moving change. The languages change. The destinations change. But the reasons, war, hunger, the hope for dignity, they remain exactly the same.
And the source closes with this powerful line, "It is always the same sea, only the shore changes."
That is something to really sit with.
It really is. Whether it's 1624 or 2024, the human drive to find a path that isn't closed remains the same. We are all just water seeking an open path.
And perhaps that's the biggest takeaway. We're all in some way seeking that Unversehrtheit, that wholeness.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. But before you go, here's a thought to mull over. If history is a cycle of seeking safe harbor, who are the Palatines of today? And are we acting like the skeptical Londoners or the welcoming Germantown Quakers? Think about it. Thanks for listening.